You like the $5,000 I send you every month, right, Mom? My son asked, smiling across the Christmas dinner table, and I looked him straight in the eye and said, I never got a dime. The words seemed to hang in the air longer than they should have, like something fragile that no one quite knew how to catch before it shattered. The soft glow of the Christmas lights reflected off the polished oak table, the one my late husband and I had bought over 30 years ago, and for a moment everything felt frozen. Daniel's smile faltered just slightly, the way it used to when he was a boy caught in a lie he didn't understand yet. Across from him, Sophia let out a small, sudden cough, too sharp, too quick, as if her body had reacted before her mind could catch up. I noticed it immediately. I always noticed things like that. At 71, you learn to read silence better than words. I folded my hands gently in my lap, the same way I used to when I was trying to stay composed at church, and I waited. No one spoke. The clinking of silverware had stopped. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen seemed louder now, filling the space where conversation should have been. It was supposed to be a good evening. I had spent the entire morning preparing dinner, even though my arthritis had been acting up again. I made Daniel's favorite roasted turkey, the one with the herb butter he used to beg for when he was a teenager, and I baked the apple pie from scratch, the way my husband used to like it before he passed 3 years ago. I didn't mind the effort. I never did. Cooking for my family had always been my way of holding us together, even when everything else felt like it was slowly drifting apart. Daniel leaned back in his chair now, confusion replacing that easy confidence he carried so naturally these days. He looked successful, polished, everything a mother hopes her son will become. His watch alone probably cost more than what I spent on groceries in a month. I was proud of him. I had always been proud of him. But pride doesn't fill an empty mailbox. Pride doesn't pay for prescriptions. I could feel his eyes searching my face, trying to understand whether I was joking, whether this was some kind of misunderstanding. What do you mean? He asked finally, his voice quieter now, more careful. I tilted my head slightly, not in accusation, not in anger, just in quiet certainty. I mean exactly what I said, I replied. I never received anything. Another silence followed, heavier this time. Sophia shifted in her seat, reaching for her glass of water, but her hand wasn't as steady as she probably thought it was. She took a sip, then another, her eyes avoiding both of ours. I had seen that look before, though I hadn't understood it then. Not fully. Not until now. Daniel sat forward again, his brows knitting together as he pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. That's not possible, he muttered, more to himself than to me. I've been sending it every month. $5,000. For over a year. $5,000. Every month. The number echoed in my mind, not with excitement, but with something colder. Something sharper. I thought about the nights I had sat at my kitchen table, going over bills, deciding which ones could wait another week. I thought about the times I had cut my medication in half to make it last longer. I thought about the old coat I had worn through 2 winters because buying a new one didn't feel necessary. I had told myself it was fine, that I didn't want to burden him, that he had his own life now. Sophia cleared her throat again, this time more deliberately, forcing a small laugh that didn't quite land. Maybe there's been some kind of mix-up, she said, her tone light but stretched thin at the edges. You know how these things can get with banks and paperwork. I turned my gaze to her then, slowly, calmly, the way you look at something you finally decided to understand. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes didn't. They flickered just for a second, and in that second something inside me settled. Not broke. Settled. Like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place after years of not quite fitting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't question her. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, sitting at that table, with the Christmas lights glowing softly behind her and my son staring down at his phone in growing disbelief, I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. This wasn't a mistake. It never was. I did not argue with him that night. I did not need to. The truth had already done something far more powerful than any raised voice ever could. It had shifted the room. It had shifted him. Daniel was still staring at his phone, scrolling, tapping, scrolling again as if the answer might change if he looked hard enough. I recognized that look. It was the same one he used to have when he was trying to solve a problem he did not expect, something that did not fit neatly into the life he believed he understood. Across from him, Sophia had gone quiet, her earlier composure slipping in small, almost invisible ways. Her shoulders were a little tighter. Her smile had disappeared entirely now. She set her glass down carefully, too carefully, like someone trying not to draw attention but doing exactly that. I reached for my napkin and folded it once, then twice, placing it beside my plate with steady hands. My appetite had left me, but not in a dramatic way. Simply was not there anymore. Just like so many other things that had quietly disappeared from my life over the past few years. I thought back to last winter, when the heating bill had been higher than usual. I remembered standing by the thermostat, turning it down by 2 degrees, telling myself that a sweater would be enough. I remembered skipping a follow-up appointment because the copay felt like too much that month. I remembered opening my mailbox again and again, expecting something different, even though deep down I knew nothing would be there. And still I never questioned it. Not once. Because I trusted them. Because I believed that if my son said he was taking care of me, then he was. That was the kind of man I raised him to be. Or at least that was what I thought. Daniel suddenly stopped scrolling. His hand froze midair, his eyes narrowing slightly at something on the screen. He tapped once more, then looked up at me, and for the first time that evening, there was no confidence left in his expression, only confusion. "Mom," he said slowly, "the transfers are here. Every month. Same amount. Same account." His voice was steady, but I could hear the strain underneath it, the beginning of something unraveling. I nodded once, not surprised. "I believe you," I said. And I meant it. That was the strange part. I did not doubt him. Not in that moment. Because whatever had happened, it was not something he thought he was hiding. Which meant someone else had been very careful. Sophia shifted again, this time pushing her chair back just slightly, the soft scrape against the hardwood floor breaking the silence in a way that felt louder than it should have. "Maybe we should not get into all this right now," she said quickly, her voice light but rushed. "It is Christmas. We can figure it out later." Later. That word hung there, thin and fragile. I turned my head toward her again, meeting her eyes fully this time. I did not smile. I did not frown. I simply looked. And in that look I saw something I had missed for years. Not just discomfort. Not just annoyance. Something more deliberate. Something practiced. I thought about the time she had insisted on handling paperwork for Daniel because she was better with details. The time she had told me not to worry about finances because everything was taken care of. The time she had subtly redirected conversations whenever money came up, always with that same polished ease. At the time it had seemed helpful, thoughtful even. Now it felt like something else entirely. Daniel was still staring at his phone, but his focus had shifted. He was no longer just reading. He was thinking, replaying, connecting things he had not questioned before. "This account," he said quietly, almost to himself, "it is not yours." I did not respond right away. I let the words settle, let them find their place in the room, just like everything else that night. Finally I spoke, my voice calm, almost gentle. "No," I said. "It is not." Another silence followed, but this one felt different. It was no longer empty. It was full of something forming, something that could not be undone. Sophia stood up then, too quickly this time, her chair pushing back with a sharper sound. "I am going to check on the dessert," she said, already turning toward the kitchen before either of us could respond. I watched her walk away, her steps measured but not quite steady, and I felt that same quiet certainty settle deeper inside me. I did not chase after her. I did not stop her. Some things reveal themselves best when you give them space to unfold. Daniel did not move either. He just sat there, his phone still in his hand, his world rearranging itself piece by piece. And I sat across from him, calm and still, realizing that for the first time in a very long time, I was not the one left in the dark. I did not move from my chair after Sophia left the room. I did not need to follow her to understand what was happening. Some truths do not require chasing. They sit quietly, waiting for you to finally see them clearly. Daniel was still seated across from me, but he no longer looked like the man who had walked into my house earlier that evening. Something in his posture had changed. His shoulders were slightly hunched now, his focus no longer scattered across his phone, but narrowed, sharp, as if he was looking at his life from a distance for the first time. He tapped his screen again, slower this time, more deliberate. "There are confirmations," he said quietly, almost as if he was reading to himself. "Every transfer. Every month. It has been automatic." I nodded once, my hands resting calmly in my lap. I let him continue. He needed to arrive at it on his own. That was the only way it would matter. "I set this up over a year ago," he went on, his voice tightening slightly. "I remember sitting with Sophia, making sure everything would be simple for you. I did not want you to have to deal with anything complicated." I could hear the memory forming as he spoke, the pieces aligning in his mind, not just what he had done, but how it had been done. I had been there too, in a different way. I remembered that conversation. Not the details, not the numbers, but the tone, the reassurance. The way Sophia had smiled and said she would take care of everything so that Daniel would not have to worry. At the time it had sounded like kindness. Now it sounded like something else. Something quieter. Something more controlled. Daniel stopped speaking for a moment, his thumb hovering over the screen as if he had reached a point he did not want to cross. Then he did. He opened something else. His eyes scanned quickly, then slowed. His jaw tightened. "This account," he said again, more firmly now. "It is under a different name." He looked up at me, searching my face, not for confirmation this time but for understanding. I held his gaze steady and calm. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was heavy with realization. Daniel leaned back slightly, running a hand through his hair in a gesture I had not seen since he was much younger, before success had polished away those small human habits. "Why would it not be yours?" he asked, though I could tell he was no longer asking me. He was asking himself. Asking the version of himself that had trusted too easily, that had assumed too much. I did not answer right away. Instead, I let my mind drift back through the past 2 years. Not in a rush, but slowly, carefully. Like turning the pages of a book I had read before but never truly understood. I remembered the first time Sophia had offered to help with paperwork, saying it would be easier if everything was organized in one place. I remembered the way she would gently step in whenever Daniel and I spoke about finances, always with a reassuring tone. Always with a solution that did not involve me needing to see anything directly. I remembered how often she would say, "Do not worry, Margaret, everything is already handled." At the time it had felt like being cared for. Now it felt like being managed. There is a difference, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. From the kitchen I could hear faint movement, the soft clink of dishes, the sound of someone trying to appear busy. Sophia was not checking on dessert. She was buying time. Daniel heard it too. His eyes flickered briefly toward the doorway, then back to his phone. He tapped again, opening what looked like a detailed record, something more official, something that did not leave room for interpretation. His breathing changed slightly, not faster but deeper, like someone bracing for something they already suspected was true. "The account is joint," he said slowly. "It has both our names on it." I did not react outwardly. I had expected that. What I had not expected was how calm I would feel hearing it spoken aloud. Perhaps because deep down, I had known something was wrong long before this night. I just had not allowed myself to name it. Daniel looked up again, his expression no longer confused, but sharpened by something more precise. Disbelief turning into clarity. "But the primary holder," he added, his voice quieter now, almost careful, "is Sophia." There it was. Not loud, not dramatic, just a fact sitting plainly between us. I could feel the weight of it settle into the room, into him, into everything that had led up to this moment. I did not need to say anything. The truth had already done its work. Daniel lowered his phone slowly, placing it on the table as if it carried more weight than it should have. He did not look at me right away. Instead, he stared at the surface of the table, at the reflection of the Christmas lights shimmering faintly across it, distorted and broken into small scattered points. "She told me it was safer this way," he said finally, "that it would be easier to manage everything together." His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something he had not brought into the room before. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Something colder. I folded my hands again, the movement slow and deliberate. "Sometimes," I said gently, What is easier for one person is not always better for another. He nodded once, almost absent-mindedly, but I could tell he understood. Not just the words but everything behind them. From the kitchen the sounds had stopped. Completely. The silence there was different now. Not busy. Not distracted. Waiting. Daniel turned his head slightly toward the doorway, then back to me. His expression settled into something I had not seen in a very long time. Awareness. Clear, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. And in that moment, sitting across from my son, I realized that the night was no longer about what I had lost. It was about what he was finally beginning to see. I had always believed that time reveals people slowly, gently, like light coming through a window at dawn, but that night it felt different, sharper, as if everything that had been hidden had decided to step forward all at once without asking permission. Daniel did not speak for a long moment after that. Realization settled between us, and I did not rush to fill the silence. I had spent most of my life filling silences for other people, smoothing over discomfort, making things easier so no one had to sit too long with what they did not want to face. But not tonight. Tonight, I let the silence stay exactly where it belonged. He picked up his phone again, not with the frantic energy from before, but with a kind of quiet focus that told me he was no longer searching for answers, he was confirming them. His finger moved slowly across the screen, opening records, tracing dates, following patterns that had been there all along but had never been questioned. It all lines up, he said eventually, his voice low, controlled. Every transfer went into that account. Every single one. I watched him carefully, not as a mother watching her son, but as someone witnessing a shift, a moment where something inside a person changes direction and cannot go back. His expression was no longer confused. It was precise now. Calculated. The way people look when they begin to understand not just what happened but how it happened. From the kitchen there was still no sound. Not even the soft movement of dishes anymore. It was too quiet, and that kind of quiet is never accidental. It is chosen. I glanced briefly toward the doorway, then back to Daniel. You trusted her, I said, not as an accusation but as a simple observation. He let out a slow breath, his shoulders rising and falling as if the weight of that truth had finally reached him. I did, he replied. I thought I was making things easier for you. For both of you. I nodded slightly. You were trying to help, I said. There is nothing wrong with that. He looked up at me then, something like regret flickering in his eyes, but I did not let it settle there. Regret is easy. Understanding is harder. And understanding is what matters. He set his phone down again, this time more deliberately, placing it flat on the table as if he had reached the end of something. Or perhaps the beginning. She told me you did not like dealing with banks, he said. That you preferred things to be handled quietly so you would not have to worry. I almost smiled, but not because it was amusing, because it was familiar. That was exactly how she would say it. Thoughtful. Considerate. Framed as care. I never said that, I replied calmly, but it sounds like something someone might say on my behalf. He leaned back slightly, his gaze drifting for a moment, not away from the situation, but deeper into it, into the small details he had overlooked before. She always handled things, he murmured. Bills, accounts, transfers. I let her. I did not respond right away. Instead, I let my mind trace back through the years again, but this time with clarity. I remembered the small moments I had dismissed. The time Sophia would answer questions directed at me before I had the chance to speak. The way she would gently correct details, adjust timelines, reshape conversations in ways that felt subtle enough to ignore but consistent enough to matter. At the time it had seemed like efficiency. Now it felt like control. There is a difference between helping someone and speaking for them, between supporting someone and slowly removing them from their own place in a conversation. I had not seen it then. Or perhaps I had, but I chose not to look too closely, because it was easier to believe in harmony than to question it. From the kitchen there was a faint sound now. A drawer opening, then closing. Measured. Careful. Daniel heard it too. His eyes shifted briefly, then returned to me, sharper now, more aware than I had seen in years. How long? He asked suddenly. The question was simple, but the weight behind it was not. I considered it for a moment, not because I did not know the answer, but because I wanted to be sure I understood the question. How long have I been receiving nothing? I clarified gently. He nodded once. I folded my hands together again, the movement slow, deliberate, grounding. As far as I can tell, I said, it has been the same amount of time you believe you have been sending something. He closed his eyes briefly just for a second, but it was enough. Enough to see the shift from assumption to realization, from trust to something else entirely. When he opened them again, there was no confusion left. Only clarity. Quiet, steady, and unmistakable. That means, he began, but he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. We both understood where it led. The kitchen remained silent again, but it no longer felt like distance. It felt like something waiting just beyond the edge of the room. Something that had not yet stepped forward but would have to sooner or later. Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. His posture no longer relaxed, no longer casual. It was focused now. Intentional. I need to talk to her, he said. Not loudly, not forcefully, but with a certainty that had not been there before. I met his gaze steady and calm. Of course, I said. And then after a brief pause I added quietly, just make sure you are ready to hear the answer. Because sometimes the truth is not just about what was done. It is about how easily it was allowed to happen. And once you see that, you cannot return to not knowing. Daniel did not get up immediately after he said he needed to talk to her. Instead, he remained seated for a few seconds longer, as if he was gathering something inside himself, something that had been steady for years and was now shifting into a different shape. I watched him carefully, not with worry, but with a kind of quiet attention I had learned over time, the kind that does not interrupt, does not guide, but simply allows. He stood slowly, pushing his chair back with a controlled motion, not abrupt, not hesitant, just certain. The kind of certainty that does not come from confidence, but from realization. He walked toward the kitchen without looking back, his steps measured, his posture straighter than before, as if the weight he carried had changed, not lighter but clearer. I stayed where I was, my hands still folded in my lap, my gaze resting on the table in front of me. The Christmas lights reflected faintly in the polished surface, their soft glow broken into small fragments, just like everything else that evening. From where I sat, I could not see into the kitchen, but I could hear enough. Not words at first, just the shift in energy, the presence of two people standing in the same space with something unspoken between them. Then Daniel's voice, low and steady. Not raised, not accusing. Simply direct. We need to talk. There was a pause, brief but heavy. I imagined Sophia turning to face him, her expression composed, her posture controlled, the same way it had always been when she needed to manage a situation. About what? She asked, her tone even, almost casual, as if she did not already know. I could hear the slight tension underneath it, though. The kind that only reveals itself if you have learned to listen for it. Daniel did not answer immediately. I could picture him looking at her the way he had looked at me just moments before, not searching anymore but seeing. About the account, he said finally. Another silence followed, longer this time. The kind that stretches just enough to say more than any explanation could. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was softer, carefully measured. I told you before, it is just easier this way. Everything is organized. There is no confusion. Organized. No confusión. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of frustration but recognition. That was always how she framed things. As solutions. As improvements. Never as decisions that removed someone else from the process entirely. Daniel's response came more quickly this time. Easier for who? He asked. There was no sharpness in his tone, no edge. But there was something else now. Something firm. Something that did not bend. I opened my eyes again, my gaze returning to the quiet table, my breathing steady, my thoughts clear. In the kitchen, I could hear the faint sound of movement, perhaps Sophia shifting her weight, perhaps reaching for something to do with her hands. People often do that when they need time. I was helping, she said a little more quickly now. Your mom does not like dealing with these things. I made sure everything was handled properly. Daniel did not respond right away. And in that pause I could feel the shift again, the same one that had begun at the table now extending into the next room. She never said that, he replied. Not loudly. Not forcefully. Just clearly. the kind of clarity that leaves no room for interpretation. Another silence. Then a small exhale, almost imperceptible but enough. "You are overthinking this," Sophia said, her voice tightening just slightly. "The money is there. It has always been there. Nothing is missing." I tilted my head just slightly, listening carefully. That was an interesting choice of words. Not nothing was taken. Not everything is fine. Just nothing is missing. Daniel caught it too. I could hear it in the way his voice changed when he spoke again. "It is not in her account," he said. "It has never been in her account." There it was. No longer a question. No longer a suspicion. A statement. The kind that does not ask for agreement. The kind that simply exists. From the kitchen there was no immediate reply this time. Just silence. Not the soft kind from earlier, but something heavier. Something that pressed against the walls and filled the space completely. I remained still, my hands resting where they had been, my posture unchanged. I did not need to see what was happening to understand it. Some moments are clearer when you do not look directly at them. Daniel spoke again, slower now, each word placed carefully. "Why is your name the primary holder?" Another pause. Longer. Then Sophia's voice, quieter now, less composed than before. "Because I was managing it," she said. "It made sense at the time. Made sense. I let that settle. Not because it explained anything, but because it revealed everything." In the kitchen I could hear Daniel take a step. The subtle shift of movement that comes when someone closes a distance, not physically but emotionally. "And you never thought to tell me?" he asked. "No anger. Just disbelief. The kind that does not need volume to be heard." There was no answer right away. And in that silence I understood something with complete clarity. This was no longer about money. It was about trust. About who had it, who had used it, and who was only now realizing how easily it had been redirected. I sat quietly in the dining room, surrounded by the remains of a dinner that had started as something warm and familiar, and had become something else entirely. Not broken. Not chaotic. Just revealed. And as the quiet conversation continued just out of sight, I realized that for the first time in a very long time, I was no longer the one trying to hold everything together. I was simply watching it come into focus. The silence in the kitchen stretched longer than before, and I could feel the weight of it from where I sat, even without seeing their faces. It was not the kind of silence that comes from confusion anymore. It was the kind that follows a question that has already answered itself. Daniel did not repeat what he had asked. He did not need to. The question was still there, steady and unmoving, waiting for something real in return. When Sophia finally spoke again, her voice was different. Not as smooth. Not as controlled. There was a slight break in it, almost imperceptible but enough. "I was protecting the money," she said. "That is all. I was making sure it was used responsibly." I let out a slow breath, not out of surprise but recognition. That was the shift. When someone can no longer deny what they have done, they begin to redefine it. Daniel did not respond immediately. I could imagine the look on his face now, the one he used when something did not align with what he knew to be true. "Protecting it from who?" he asked. His voice was still calm, but there was a precision in it now, a careful edge that had not been there earlier. There was a small pause, and then Sophia answered, more quickly this time, as if speed might make it sound more reasonable. "From being spent too quickly. From mistakes. I was just managing it until the right time." Managing. The word settled into the space between them, heavy and deliberate. I lowered my gaze slightly, my eyes resting on the faint reflection of the lights again, my thoughts steady. Managing implies permission. It implies trust that has been given, not taken. Daniel understood that too. "You never told me you were keeping it," he said. Not accusing. Not loud. Just clear. The kind of clarity that does not leave room for explanation to hide inside it. Another pause. Then softer, almost defensive, Sophia replied, "You knew I was handling things." That was true in a way. She had always been handling things, just not in the way anyone else understood. Daniel took a slow breath, and I could hear it from where I sat, the shift in his breathing marking the moment he stopped looking for justification and started looking at facts. "Handling things is not the same as taking control," he said. "And it is definitely not the same as not telling me where the money was going." There was no answer right away. Just the quiet hum of the house, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, the kind of ordinary sounds that suddenly feel much louder when everything else has gone still. I sat quietly, my posture unchanged, my hands still folded, but inside something had settled fully now. Not anger. Not even disappointment in the way people expect. It was something quieter. A kind of understanding that arrives late but stays steady. I thought about the last year, the way Sophia had always seemed slightly ahead of every conversation, always ready with an answer, always positioned just enough to guide decisions without appearing to make them. I had seen it. I had felt it. But I had told myself it was easier not to question it. Easier to believe that everything was as it should be. That belief had been comfortable. But comfort and truth are not always the same thing. In the kitchen, Daniel spoke again, slower this time, each word carrying more weight than the last. How much is in that account? There it was. Not how much did you take. Not why did you do it. Just how much remains. The question of reality, not intention. Sophia hesitated. I could hear it clearly now. Not just a pause, but a hesitation that stretched just long enough to say everything that needed to be said. Most of it, she answered finally. I have been saving it. It is still there. Still there. I closed my eyes briefly, letting that phrase settle. Not gone. Not spent. Just moved. Controlled. Held somewhere else without permission. Daniel did not respond right away. And when he did, his voice had changed again, not louder, not sharper, but steadier in a way that felt final. It was never yours to manage alone, he said. There was no anger in it. That was what made it heavier. Anger can be dismissed. Calm cannot. From the kitchen there was no reply this time. Just silence again. But it was not the same silence as before. This one was not hiding anything. It was holding everything in plain view. I remained seated at the table, listening without listening, present without needing to intervene. For years I had believed that being part of a family meant stepping back, letting others take the lead, trusting that they would carry things forward with care. And for years I had done exactly that. But sitting there now, with the truth laid out not in words but in the spaces between them, I understood something I had not allowed myself to fully see before. Trust does not disappear all at once. It shifts slowly, quietly, until one day you realize it has been standing somewhere else entirely. And once you see that, there is no returning to the version of things you believed in before. The quiet in the kitchen did not break all at once. It shifted slowly, like something adjusting to a new shape it had not planned for. I could hear Daniel move again, a single step, then another, not pacing, not restless, just repositioning himself as if he needed to stand somewhere different to fully understand what he was facing. Sophia did not speak immediately after his last words, and that silence said more than anything she had offered so far. When she finally answered, her voice had changed again. It was softer now, not in a calm way, but in a careful one, like someone choosing each word with precision. I was going to tell you, she said. I just needed the right time. I tilted my head slightly where I sat, my gaze steady, my thoughts clear. The right time. That phrase has a way of appearing when there has already been too much time. Daniel did not react to it the way he might have before. There was no immediate acceptance, no quiet agreement. Instead, there was a pause, deliberate and controlled. You had over a year, he replied. His voice was still even, but there was no softness left in it now. Not harsh. Just resolved. That was new. I had not heard that tone from him in a very long time. From the kitchen there was a faint sound, the kind that comes when someone shifts their weight, unsure whether to move forward or step back. It was complicated, Sophia said, a little more quickly now. I was trying to make sure everything stayed secure. You know how things can get with money. People make mistakes. I closed my eyes briefly, not in frustration but in understanding. That was the pattern. Not denial. Not fully, but redirection. Turning intention into explanation, explanation into justification. It was subtle. It was practiced. And it had worked for a long time. Daniel let out a slow breath, and I could hear it clearly, the shift from listening to deciding. You are not answering the question, he said. You are explaining around it. There was no reply right away. And in that space I could feel the balance change again, not suddenly but firmly. For years, the conversations in this family had moved around Sophia's words, adjusted to them, followed their direction without resistance. Now, for the first time, they were stopping in place, refusing to move unless the truth moved with them. "Did you ever plan to tell me?" Daniel asked. The question was simple, direct. It left no room for interpretation. In the kitchen, there was a longer silence this time, one that stretched just enough to remove any doubt about what the answer might be. When Sophia finally spoke, her voice was quieter than before. "I thought it would be better if I handled it," she said. Not yes, not no, just another shift. Another careful step away from the center of the question. Daniel did not follow her there. "That is not what I asked," he said. Still calm, still steady, but unmistakably firm. I opened my eyes again, my gaze resting on the doorway now, not because I needed to see them, but because I could feel the moment approaching its point of clarity. This was not about catching someone in a mistake anymore. It was about whether they would stand inside the truth or continue to move around it. Another pause. Then finally Sophia spoke again, and this time there was no smoothness left in her voice. "No polished." Just something raw, something closer to what had been hidden beneath all of it. "No," she said. It was a small word. Quiet. But it settled heavily into the space, into the house, into everything that had led up to that moment. Daniel did not respond right away. And when he did, his voice was not louder, not sharper, but it carried something different. Not confusion, not disbelief, just acceptance of what was now undeniable. "Okay," he said. Just that. No argument. No raised tone. Just acknowledgement. That was the moment I knew something had truly changed. Not because of what was said, but because of what was no longer needed. There was nothing left to uncover. Nothing left to interpret. The truth had stepped fully into the room, and it did not need to be explained any further. From where I sat, I remained still, my hands resting. Gently, my breathing even. I did not feel the urge to go into the kitchen. I did not feel the need to add my voice to what had already been said. This was not my moment to intervene. It was his moment to see. And he had. In the kitchen, I could hear Daniel move again, a step back this time. A subtle shift that suggested distance. Not just physical, but something deeper. "We are going to fix this," he said finally. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was something firm beneath it now. Something that had not been there before tonight. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. And clarity, once it settles in, does not leave easily. Sophia did not respond immediately, and when she did, her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. Not defensive. Not persuasive. Just quiet. And that quiet told me everything I needed to know. The balance had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Daniel did not come back to the table right away after he said they were going to fix it. I could hear the shift in the kitchen. Not loud, not chaotic, just a quiet reordering of something that had been out of place for far too long. There was no raised voice, no dramatic exchange, just the steady presence of a truth that no longer needed to be argued. I remained seated, my posture unchanged, my hands still resting calmly in my lap, but my attention had sharpened in a way that felt different from before. Not watchful, not guarded, just aware. After a few moments, I heard footsteps, measured and even, and then Daniel appeared in the doorway. He did not look at me immediately. Instead, he paused there for a second, as if adjusting to the room again, to the version of it that no longer held the same assumptions it had earlier that evening. When he finally walked back to the table, his movements were deliberate, controlled, not rushed, not hesitant. He pulled out his chair and sat down slowly, placing both hands flat against the surface of the table, as if grounding himself in something real. I looked at him quietly, not asking anything, not needing to. His expression had settled into something steady now. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just clear. That clarity changed everything. "I called the bank," he said after a moment. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to it now, something firm and anchored. "They are going to freeze the account temporarily until everything is sorted out." I nodded once, not surprised, not impressed, just acknowledging what needed to be done. Action, when it comes after understanding, tends to be quiet. "Good," I said simply. He glanced at me briefly, then back down at his hands. I also requested full statements, he continued. Every transaction, every withdrawal, everything. The way he said everything made it clear that this was no longer about guessing or trusting. It was about knowing. Fully. Completely. Without interpretation. I let that settle between us, the quiet strength of it filling the space where uncertainty had been earlier. From the kitchen there was no sound now. Not movement. Not even the soft presence of someone standing just out of sight. It felt empty in a way that was different from before. Not hidden, not waiting, just absent. That absence spoke in its own way. Daniel exhaled slowly, leaning back just slightly in his chair, his eyes lifting to meet mine again. I should have checked sooner, he said. Not as an apology, not seeking reassurance, just stating something he had come to understand. I did not rush to soften it. There are moments when the truth should not be adjusted to make it easier. Maybe, I replied gently. But you are checking now. He nodded once, accepting that, not arguing with it, not adding to it. Just letting it stand as it was. That was new too. The room felt different now, not lighter but more stable. Like something that had been uneven had finally been leveled, even if the process of fixing it was not finished yet. I reached for my glass of water and took a small sip, my movements unhurried, natural, as if the evening had not shifted at all, even though everything about it had changed. When I set the glass back down, the faint sound it made against the table seemed clearer than before, sharper, more defined. Daniel watched the movement, not intently, but with a quiet attention that had not been there earlier. The money is still there, he said after a moment. Most of it, at least. I inclined my head slightly, not reacting strongly, just absorbing the information. That is something, I said. He gave a small nod, but his expression did not soften. It should have been with you, he replied. From the beginning. There was no hesitation in his voice when he said that. No uncertainty. Just a statement of fact. I met his gaze, holding it for a moment steady and calm. Yes, I said. And that was enough. No need to expand on it. No need to revisit what had already been revealed. Some truths do not need to be repeated to be understood. Daniel leaned forward slightly again, his forearms resting on the table, his posture focused, intentional. I am going to transfer everything into a new account, he said. One that is only in your name. No intermediaries. No confusión. I listened, not with urgency, not with expectation, just with a quiet acknowledgement of what was being set into motion. That sounds appropriate, I replied. He paused briefly, then added, and I am going to make sure you have direct access. Full visibility. Every detail. I nodded again, the movement small but certain. For years I had not asked for those things. Not because I did not deserve them, but because I believed trust meant not needing to see everything. Tonight had shown me something different. Trust is not the absence of clarity. It is built on it. Daniel sat back again, his shoulders relaxing slightly, not from relief, but from resolution. The kind that comes when something has been decided, not just in words but in understanding. I looked at him for a moment longer, seeing not just the man he had become, but the shift he had gone through in the span of a single evening. It was quiet. It was subtle. But it was real. And as the house settled into a stillness that felt different from the one before, I realized that nothing about this night needed to be louder than it already was. The truth had done exactly what it needed to do. It had made everything clear. The house felt different after everything had been said, not quieter in the way it had been earlier, but settled, as if something that had been out of place for a long time had finally been acknowledged and set down where it belonged. Daniel remained at the table with me, his posture no longer tense, but not relaxed either, just steady, as if he had reached a point where movement was no longer necessary. I could sense that he was still thinking, still going through everything in his mind, but it was no longer scattered. It was organized now, clear in a way that only comes after the truth has been fully seen. I reached for the edge of my plate and gently moved it a few inches, not because it needed to be moved, but because the small action felt grounding, something simple and real in a night that had shifted so much. Daniel watched the movement, then looked back up at me, his expression softer than before, but not in a way that asked for forgiveness, just in a way that acknowledged what had happened. I am sorry, he said after a moment. The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Not because they fixed anything but because they were real. I met his gaze, holding it for a brief moment, not to evaluate it, not to question it, just to accept that it had been said. I know, I replied gently. And I did. His mistake had not been intention. It had been assumption. And assumptions, when left unchecked, can quietly reshape everything without anyone noticing until it is too late. From the kitchen there was still no sound. The absence of it no longer felt like tension. Felt like distance. Not the kind that comes from anger, but the kind that forms when something fundamental has changed. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair, exhaling slowly, as if releasing something he had been holding on to for longer than he realized. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said. I thought I had everything under control. I nodded once, understanding the place that thought came from. Sometimes control is just something we believe we have, I said quietly. Until we look closer. He gave a small nod, not disagreeing, not defending himself, just accepting the truth of it. That was enough. I did not need more from him. Not explanations. Not reassurances. Just that understanding. The room remained still, the soft glow of the lights casting long, quiet reflections across the table. The kind that do not draw attention to themselves but change the way everything looks if you take the time to notice. After a while, Daniel reached for his phone again, not with urgency this time but with intention. He checked something briefly, then set it back down. The bank will have everything sorted by tomorrow, he said. And I will come by in the morning to go over it with you. I inclined my head slightly. That sounds fine, I replied. There was no need for more than that. Plans did not need to be complicated. They just needed to be clear. He hesitated for a moment, then added, and from now on you will have direct access to everything. No one else will be handling it. I looked at him steadily, not with skepticism, not with relief, just with quiet acknowledgement. That is how it should have been, I said. He nodded again, the movement small but certain. We sat there for a few moments longer, not speaking, not needing to. The silence now was different from the one that had filled the room at the beginning of the evening. It was not heavy. It was not uncertain. It was simply there, steady and neutral, like something that no longer needed to be filled. Eventually, Daniel stood, pushing his chair back gently, his movements controlled, thoughtful. I should go, he said. There is a lot I need to take care of. I did not stop him. I did not ask him to stay. Some things are better handled in the space that comes after a moment like this. Drive safely, I said. He gave a small nod, then paused just briefly, as if considering something more but deciding against it. Then he turned and walked toward the door, his steps quiet but certain. I listened as the front door opened, then closed, the sound soft but final in a way that marked the end of something that had been unfolding for a long time. The house grew still again, but this time it did not feel empty. It felt clear. I sat at the table for a few moments longer, my hands resting gently in front of me, my gaze drifting across the familiar room, seeing it not as it had been earlier that evening, but as it was now. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I reached out and turned off the small string of lights along the center of the table, one simple motion, the glow fading quietly into darkness. And in that stillness I realized something with complete certainty. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to fight for anything. Because the moment the truth was seen, everything had already begun to shift back into its proper place. And that was more powerful than anything I could have said.